When Tessa Lane scrubs a breakroom floor, she doesn't know the janitor watching her is actually the CEO, and he's about to change her life with one impossible offer. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Tessa Lane stared at the last $20 in her wallet and sighed. The electricity bill was due tomorrow, and her younger brother Marcus needed new shoes for school. Something had to give, and it wouldn't be her brother's education. "Marcus, you're going to be late," she called out, sliding a piece of toast onto a plate. Her brother, 16 and growing too fast for their budget, shuffled into the kitchen of their small apartment. His school uniform hung loose at his shoulders, and the shoes he wore had holes starting to form at the toes. "I'm not hungry," he mumbled, grabbing his backpack. "Eat anyway," Tessa said firmly, pushing the plate toward him. "I've got 3 interviews today. One of them has to work out." Marcus took a bite of toast and looked at his sister with concern in his eyes. "You already work at the diner. When are you going to sleep?" Tessa smiled, though exhaustion pulled at the corners of her mouth. "I'll sleep when we're caught up on bills. Now go on, get to school. Education first, always." After Marcus left, Tessa changed into her best outfit. Black pants and a white button-up shirt she'd bought at a thrift store. Nothing fancy, but clean and presentable. She checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror, pulling her hair back into a neat bun. Her brown eyes looked tired, but determined. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. 10:00 a.m. interview at Crane Enterprises. The custodial position paid better than she'd expected and included benefits. It was worth the long bus ride downtown. Chicago's business district loomed with glass and steel, making Tessa feel small as she walked past men and women in expensive suits. Crane Enterprises occupied one of the tallest buildings, its logo stretching across the top floors. At the reception desk, a polished woman with perfectly manicured nails looked Tessa over once before speaking. "You're here for the custodial interview?" "Yes, ma'am. Tessa Lane, 10 o'clock. The receptionist handed her a visitor badge. 26th floor. Mrs. Winters will meet you." The elevator ride gave Tessa time to practice her answers. She needed this job. Not wanted, needed. The diner barely covered rent, and Marcus deserved more than hand-me-downs and late notices on the door. On the 26th floor, a stern-looking woman in a grey suit waited by the elevator. "Ms. Lane, I'm Patricia Winters, head of building services." She didn't offer her hand. "Follow me." They walked through a busy office space. People hurried past without looking up from phones or conversations. Tessa kept her head high, ignoring the way some glanced at her with dismissive curiosity. Mrs. Winters led her to a small break room, where a man in blue maintenance coveralls sat drinking coffee. He had dark hair that fell across his forehead and stubble on his jaw. When he looked up, Tessa noticed his eyes, sharp and observant, a deep blue that seemed out of place with his worn clothes. "This is Edward," Mrs. Winters said without introducing Tessa. "He'll be evaluating your practical skills while I handle the paperwork portion." The man nodded slightly but didn't speak. Mrs. Winters pointed to a mop and bucket in the corner. "Your first task is simple. Clean this floor as you would during a regular shift. Edward will observe. I'll be back in 20 minutes. With that, she walked out, leaving Tessa alone with the quiet man. "So you're the supervisor?" Tessa asked, moving toward the cleaning supplies. He shook his head. "Just another janitor. Been here a few years." Tessa nodded and filled the bucket at the sink. She'd cleaned plenty in her life. The diner, their apartment, even the community center where Marcus played basketball. This was nothing new. She worked methodically, starting from the far corner. The room wasn't particularly dirty, but she noticed coffee stains near the machine and crumbs under the table. As she worked, she hummed quietly, an old habit that helped pass the time. The man, Edward, watched without comment, occasionally sipping his coffee. His silence might have been uncomfortable, but Tessa was used to being invisible. She worked her way around the room, even moving chairs to get underneath them. "You don't have to do all that," Edward finally said. "Just the main floor is fine." Tessa shrugged. "If I'm going to clean, I might as well clean right. My grandma always said half-done work comes back to haunt you." A smile flickered across his face. "Smart woman, your grandma. She raised me and my brother after our dad left. Taught us everything important." Tessa moved to the coffee station and wiped down the counter. "What about you? Been doing this work long?" Edward seemed surprised by the question. "Long enough," he answered after a pause. "It's honest work," Tessa said, noticing a spot she'd missed. "My last boss at the diner always said there's no shame in any job done with pride. And you believe that?" Edward leaned forward slightly. "Have to. Tessa said simply. I'm not here for glamour. I'm here because my brother needs new shoes and our electricity bill is due. She immediately regretted sharing so much. Sorry, that was too personal. No, Edward said quietly. It's refreshing, actually. Tessa finished the floor and emptied the bucket in the sink. When she turned around, Edward was studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Did I miss something? She asked. He shook his head. Just the opposite. You got spots most people ignore. Before she could respond, Mrs. Winters returned with a clipboard. She inspected the room with pursed lips, then made a note. Satisfactory, she said, though the room gleamed. Now, let's discuss your experience. The next 15 minutes were filled with standard questions about her work history and availability. Edward remained silent, occasionally writing something on a notepad. When Mrs. Winters asked about her references, Tessa provided her diner manager and her former high school teacher. And why should we hire you over other candidates? Mrs. Winters asked finally. Tessa took a deep breath. Because I'll work harder than anyone you've met. This isn't just a job to me. It's a way to keep my brother in school and our lights on. I don't take shortcuts, I don't complain, and I show up every day ready to earn my pay. From the corner of her eye, she saw Edward's head lift, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Winters made another note. We'll be in touch by the end of the week. Edward will show you out. Tessa stood, smoothing her pants. Thank you for the opportunity. In the hallway, Edward walked beside her toward the elevator. You did well in there, he said quietly. Thanks. Tessa pressed the down button. Been cleaning all my life. Might as well get paid properly for it. It's more than that. You take pride in your work, that's rare. The elevator arrived and Tessa stepped in. Had to grow up fast when Dad left. Pride's free, even when nothing else is. As the doors began to close, Edward held them open for a moment. Good luck, Tessa Lane. I think you might be exactly what this place needs. The doors closed before she could respond. 2 days later, Tessa rushed through her shift at the diner, cleaning tables with practiced speed. Her phone had rung earlier, but she couldn't answer during the lunch rush. The voicemail was from Crane Enterprises, asking her to come in for a second interview tomorrow at 9 a.m. Someone's in a hurry, her manager Darlene commented, as Tessa practically threw the dishes into the sink. Got a second interview at that office building downtown, the cleaning job with benefits. Darlene nodded, her lined face softening. Good for you, honey. You deserve a break. Not there yet, Tessa cautioned. But a second interview has to be good, right? They'd be fools not to hire you. Now go on home to that brother of yours. I'll finish up here. Tessa hugged the older woman. Thanks, Darlene. I owe you. The bus ride home was spent making mental calculations. If she got the job, she could cut back hours at the diner, maybe even take that night class at the community college. Marcus could join the basketball team without worrying about fees. At their apartment, she found Marcus at the kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks. How was school? She asked, setting down her purse. Same old. Ms. Johnson says I should apply for that science program this summer. He didn't look up. But it costs money, so I told her no. Tessa felt the familiar ache in her chest, the pain of watching her brother limit his dreams to fit their reality. Hey, look at me. She waited until he raised his eyes. I got called back for a second interview at that place downtown. If it works out, maybe we can talk about that program again. Hope flickered across his face before he controlled it. It's fine, Tess. I don't need it. Well, I need you to have it, she said firmly. That's what all this is for, remember? So you can go further than I did. Marcus looked at her with sudden intensity. You know, Dad said the same thing before he left, that he was doing it all for us. The comparison stung. I'm not Dad, I'm not going anywhere. Later that night, after Marcus was asleep, Tessa laid out her one good outfit again. Tomorrow needed to go perfectly. As she ironed her shirt, she thought about the quiet man in coveralls who had watched her clean. There had been something different about him. The way he spoke, the way he observed, not like the other maintenance workers she'd known. Stop overthinking, she told herself. Just get the job. The next morning, Tessa arrived at Crane Enterprises 15 minutes early. The same receptionist directed her to the top floor this time, the executive level. There must be some mistake, Tessa said. I'm here for a custodial position. Mr. Crane requested this meeting personally, the receptionist replied with a curious look. 50th floor. His assistant will meet you. Tessa's stomach tightened with anxiety as the elevator climbed. Why would the CEO want to meet a potential janitor? Something felt wrong. The elevator opened to reveal a stunning reception area, all glass and chrome, with views of the entire city. A young woman in a designer suit approached. "Ms. Lane? I'm Sophie, Mr. Crane's assistant. He's expecting you." Tessa followed her through double doors into the largest office she'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Chicago's skyline, and a massive desk dominated the far end of the room. The man behind the desk stood as they entered, and Tessa froze. It wasn't his expensive suit that shocked her. It wasn't the way he commanded the space around him. It was his eyes, deep blue and intensely familiar, the same eyes that had watched her mop a breakroom floor 2 days ago. "Hello, Tessa," said Elliot Crane, CEO of Crane Enterprises. "Thank you for coming back." Tessa's mouth went dry. "You're him?" she whispered, her breath caught in her throat. Elliot smiled softly. "I didn't expect to meet someone who'd make me question every wall I've built, but you did. You weren't supposed to matter, and now I can't stop thinking about you." Tessa stood rooted to the floor, unable to process what was happening. The janitor who'd watched her clean, who'd nodded approvingly at her work, was the billionaire CEO whose name was on the building. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "We have a lot to talk about." Tessa didn't move. Was this some kind of joke? Watching the poor woman clean to entertain yourself? His smile faded. "No, nothing like that. It's a hiring practice I started recently. I believe how someone treats others when they think no one important is watching tells you more than any interview. So you lied, pretended to be someone you're not." "I observed," he corrected gently, "and what I saw was remarkable. You didn't just clean, you excelled. You were kind, genuine. You treated everyone with respect, including a man you thought was just a janitor." Tessa crossed her arms. "And now what? You called me up here to offer me the job because you feel sorry for me and my brother?" Elliot leaned against his desk. "I called you up here because in 15 years of business I've never met anyone who impressed me the way you did. And yes, to offer you a job, but not the one you applied for." "What does that mean?" "I'd like to offer you a position as facilities coordinator, overseeing the cleaning staff, managing schedules, ordering supplies. It pays triple what the custodial position offered, with full benefits." Tessa's heart raced. That kind of money would change everything for her and Marcus, but suspicion still nagged at her. "I don't have experience managing people, but you have integrity, work ethic, and attention to detail. The rest can be learned." He stepped closer. "This isn't charity, Tessa. This is recognition of qualities I value in my company." She looked at him, really looked. Behind the expensive suit and the power was the same man who had quietly approved when she cleaned under the chairs, who had noticed her thoroughness, who had seen her when she thought she was invisible. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course." He handed her a business card with his personal number written on the back. "Call me when you decide. The position is yours if you want it." As Tessa turned to leave, he spoke again. "For what it's worth, your grandmother was right. Half-done work does come back to haunt you. That's why people like you are so rare." In the elevator going down, Tessa stared at the card in her hand. Elliot Crane had seen her, really seen her, when she thought no one was looking, and somehow that terrified her more than any bill or hardship she'd faced before, because being truly seen meant being vulnerable, and vulnerability was a luxury Tessa Lane had never been able to afford. She tucked the card into her pocket and stepped out into the bright Chicago morning, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears she'd never anticipated when she'd applied to clean floors at Crane Enterprises. Tessa walked 3 blocks from Crane Enterprises before she finally stopped to catch her breath. Leaning against a storefront window, she pulled out the business card again. Elliot Crane, CEO. His personal number scrawled on the back in neat handwriting. "Triple the salary," she whispered to herself. "Benefits." A text from Marcus lit up her phone. How did it go? She stared at the message, unsure how to answer. How did she explain what had just happened? That the janitor who'd watched her clean was actually the billionaire owner of the company, that he'd offered her a management position she wasn't qualified for because he'd been impressed by how she mopped a floor. Still figuring it out, she texted back, "Tell you later." The diner was busy when she arrived for her afternoon shift. Darlene raised an eyebrow when she saw Tessa tying on her apron. "Thought you'd be celebrating a new job by now," she said, sliding a plate of burgers across the counter. "It's complicated," Tessa replied, grabbing the order. "I got offered something, but I don't know if I should take it. Better money than here, I assume?" Tessa nodded. "Then what's the problem?" Darlene asked, hands on her hips. "The problem is, it feels wrong, like I'm getting special treatment for no good reason." Darlene studied her for a moment. "Hon, in my 62 years on this earth, I've learned one thing for sure. Nobody offers something for nothing. If they're offering you a job, it's because they see value. The question is, what kind of value? The lunch rush kept Tessa too busy to dwell on the question, but it lingered in the back of her mind. By the time her shift ended at 8, she'd made a decision. The apartment was dark when she got home. A note from Marcus on the fridge said he was studying at his friend Kevin's house and would be back by 10. Tessa showered, changed into clean clothes, and pulled out Elliot Crane's card. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed. He answered on the second ring. Elliot Crane. It's Tessa Lane, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. About the job. I'm glad you called. His voice was different on the phone. Warmer, less formal. Have you made a decision? I have questions first, Tessa said, sitting on the edge of her bed. Real ones with real answers. Of course. Why me? Really? Not the line about integrity and work ethic. Why pull me up to your office and offer me a job I never applied for? There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Do you know how many people I meet who perform for my benefit? Who say what they think I want to hear? Who treat the janitor differently than they treat the CEO? I wouldn't know, Tessa replied. I've never been a CEO. A soft chuckle came through the phone. Fair enough. The truth is, Tessa, you didn't perform. You were the same person whether you thought someone was watching or not. Do you know how rare that is? I'm not special, Mr. Crane. Elliot, he corrected. And you're wrong. You are special. Not because of where you came from or what you've been through, but because of who you are despite it all. Tessa closed her eyes. I don't want charity. It's not charity to recognize talent and reward it accordingly, he said firmly. The position is real, the needs are real, and your qualifications, the ones that matter, are real. And if I say no, then the custodial position is still yours if you want it. No hard feelings. Tessa took a deep breath. I'll take the coordinator job, but I want to start as a probationary hire, 3 months. If I'm not good enough, you let me go. No special treatment. Agreed, Elliot said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Can you start Monday, 9 a.m.? I'll be there. She hesitated, then added, Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Crane. Elliot, he reminded her, and thank you for taking it. Good night, Tessa. She hung up and stared at the phone in her hand, wondering what she'd just set in motion. Marcus nearly choked on his cereal when Tessa told him the news the next morning. A management position at Crane Enterprises? That's like one of the biggest companies in Chicago. Facilities coordinator, Tessa corrected, pouring herself coffee. And it's probationary. 3 months to prove I can do it. But why would they hire you for that when you applied to be a janitor? Marcus asked, then winced. Sorry, that came out wrong. No, it's a fair question, Tessa said, sitting across from him. The CEO was there during my interview, disguised as a maintenance worker. Apparently it's something he does to see how people act when they don't know who's watching. Marcus's eyes widened. That's some undercover boss stuff right there. So he liked you? He liked that I cleaned under the chairs, Tessa said with a small smile. Said it showed integrity. Well, duh. You've got more integrity in your little finger than most people have in their whole body. Marcus stood and grabbed his backpack. So does this mean I can get new shoes? Tessa laughed. Yes, you can get new shoes, and maybe join that basketball team after all. Marcus's face lit up. For real? For real. We've still got to be careful with money, but things are looking up. After Marcus left for school, Tessa called Darlene to give her 2 weeks' notice at the diner. The older woman was genuinely happy for her. You deserve this break, girl. Just don't forget about us little people when you're running that fancy building. As if I could, Tessa replied warmly. You've kept me and Marcus fed for 2 years. I won't forget that. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Tessa used her last bit of savings to buy a proper business outfit. Black slacks, a blue blouse, and low heels. She practiced walking in around the apartment. On Sunday night, she ironed everything and laid it out carefully, feeling like a kid before the first day of school. Monday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. The executive elevator felt foreign as it whisked her to the 47th floor, not quite the penthouse where Elliot's office was, but close. Sophie, Elliot's assistant, was waiting when the doors opened. Good morning, Miss Lane, she said with a professional smile. I'll show you to your office. Office? Tessa repeated, following her through a busy hallway. People in suits nodded as they passed, curious eyes taking in the newcomer. Sophie opened a door to reveal a small but bright office with a desk, computer, and views of the city. Mr. Crane asked me to get you settled. Your team will be up to meet you at 10. My team? Tessa echoed, feeling increasingly out of her depth. 6 custodial supervisors, One for each section of the building, Sophie explained, handing her a folder. Their profiles are in here, along with building maps and procedures. Mr. Crane will stop by around noon to see how you're doing. After Sophie left, Tessa sank into the desk chair and opened the folder with trembling hands. Pages of information stared back at her. Schedules, staff bios, contact numbers. Reality hit her hard. She was responsible for an entire department now. I can do this, she whispered to herself. I have to do this. By 10, she'd memorized the names and faces of her supervisors. When they filed into her office, she greeted each by name, shaking hands firmly despite her nerves. They were a diverse group, 3 men and 3 women ranging in age from mid-30s to late 50s. Most regarded her with polite skepticism. I know what you're thinking, Tessa said once they were all seated. Who is this young woman and what does she know about running a custodial department? A few exchanged glances, but no one spoke. The truth is, I started as a custodial applicant. I've worked service jobs my whole life. Restaurants, cleaning, retail. I know what it's like to do the work that keeps places running, but rarely gets noticed. Frank, the oldest supervisor with salt and pepper hair, leaned forward. So how'd you end up in this office, if you don't mind me asking? Mr. Crane has a unique hiring process, Tessa said carefully. He believes in recognizing potential, even in unexpected places. I'm here on a probationary basis, and I have a lot to learn. But what I do know is how to work hard and how to treat people with respect. She took a deep breath and continued. I'm not here to shake things up or tell you how to do jobs you've been doing for years. I'm here to support you, to be your voice upstairs and to make sure your teams have what they need. So before we go any further, I want to hear from each of you. What's working, what isn't, and what you need. Slowly, the tension in the room eased as each supervisor took turns speaking. By 11:30, Tessa had filled 3 pages with notes and ideas. They were just wrapping up when a knock came at the door. Elliot Crane stood in the doorway, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Tessa's rent. The supervisors immediately straightened. Don't let me interrupt, he said with an easy smile. I just wanted to check in on Ms. Lane's first day. We were just finishing, Mr. Crane, Frank said, standing, getting acquainted with our new boss. Elliot's eyes met Tessa's. And how's that going? Very well, she replied, professional despite the flutter in her chest. I was just learning about the challenges each section faces. We have some ideas to improve efficiency. Excellent, Elliot nodded to the group. Crane Enterprises wouldn't function without your teams. I'm glad you're in good hands with Ms. Lane. After the supervisors filed out, Elliot closed the door and turned to Tessa. So, how is it really going? She let out a long breath. Overwhelming, but I think they're warming up to me. They will, he said confidently. You're a natural leader, even if you don't see it yet. I wouldn't go that far, Tessa said, shuffling her notes. But I'm trying. Elliot studied her for a moment. Have dinner with me tonight. The request caught her off guard. What? Dinner? To discuss your first day, your ideas for the department. Professionally, he added, though something in his eyes suggested otherwise. Warning bells rang in Tessa's mind. I don't think that's appropriate, Mr. Crane. I just started working for you. Elliot, he corrected again. And it's just dinner. I do it with all my department heads. Do you usually disguise yourself as a janitor for all your interviews too? She asked, before she could stop herself. To her surprise, he laughed, a genuine warm sound that transformed his face. No, that's a new approach, but it worked out well, don't you think? Despite herself, Tessa smiled. The jury's still out on that. Fair enough. He moved toward the door. The dinner invitation stands. Professional or not, I'd like to hear more about your ideas. Think about it. After he left, Tessa tried to focus on the mountain of information before her, but her thoughts kept drifting to the dinner invitation. It was inappropriate, wasn't it? He was her boss, the CEO, a man with more money and power than she could imagine. And yet, when he looked at her, she didn't feel the power imbalance. She felt seen, valued. It was as unsettling as it was flattering. By 5 o'clock, she'd made her decision. She texted Marcus that she'd be home late, then called Elliot's office. I'll join you for dinner, she told Sophie, but somewhere casual, and I'm paying for myself. Sophie seemed to stifle a laugh. I'll let Mr. Crane know. At 6, Elliot met her in the lobby, dressed down in slacks and a button-up shirt without a tie. He looked younger, more approachable. I thought we'd go to a place a few blocks away, he said as they walked out together. Best Italian food in the city, but no white tablecloths or dress codes. The restaurant was indeed casual, a family-owned establishment with checkered tablecloths and photos of Italy on the walls. The owner greeted Elliot by name and led them to a corner table. "You come here often?" Tessa asked as they settled in. "At least once a week. My father used to bring me here when I was a kid." He smiled at the memory. "Before the company took over his life." "Is that why you disguise yourself as a worker? To remember what life is like outside the executive floor?" Elliot considered this as he poured water from a carafe. "Partly. It started as a way to see how potential hires really behave, but it's become more than that." "How so?" "When I'm Edward the janitor, people tell me things they'd never tell Elliot Crane. Real things. About their lives, their struggles." He looked at her directly. "About their brothers needing shoes and their electricity bills being due." Tessa felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That was personal. It was honest," he countered. "And it reminded me why I started the policy of paying living wages to every employee, even custodial staff, because real people with real lives depend on those paychecks." The waitress came to take their orders, and Tessa was grateful for the interruption. When they were alone again, she steered the conversation to safer ground. "So tell me about the company. How did Crane Enterprises start?" For the next hour they talked about business, how Elliot's father had built the company from nothing, how Elliot had expanded it after taking over at 25 when his father died unexpectedly. Tessa shared her ideas for improving the custodial department, and Elliot listened with genuine interest. As they finished their meal, the conversation turned personal again. "Tell me about your brother," Elliot said, sipping his coffee. Tessa's face softened. "Marcus is everything to me, smart, kind, driven. He wants to be an engineer, design things that help people. Our dad left when he was 8, so it's been just us for a long time." "And your mother?" "She passed when Marcus was a baby, car accident." Tessa twisted her napkin. "My grandmother raised us until I was 18, then she got sick. I've been taking care of Marcus ever since." "That's a lot of responsibility to take on so young." Tessa shrugged. "You do what you have to for family. Not everyone would," Elliot said quietly. "My father buried himself in work after my mother left. The company became his child. I barely saw him growing up." "Is that why you became CEO? To be closer to him?" A shadow crossed Elliot's face. "I became CEO because he died of a heart attack at his desk when I was 25. There was no one else to take over." "I'm sorry," Tessa said sincerely. "That must have been hard." "It was." He met her eyes. "That's why I found it so refreshing when you talked about your brother, about working to keep him in school. It reminded me that there are more important things than stock prices and quarterly reports." The bill came, and true to her word, Tessa insisted on paying for her half despite Elliot's protests. Outside, the Chicago night was cool, stars hidden behind the glow of city lights. "I can give you a ride home," Elliot offered. "No need. I take the bus every day." "It's late, Tessa." "I take the bus later than this after diner shifts," she replied firmly. "But thank you." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "At least let me walk you to the stop." They walked in comfortable silence, the city noise filling the space between them. At the bus stop, Tessa turned to say goodbye. "Thank you for dinner, and for the job." She hesitated, then added, "I won't let you down." "I know you won't." Elliot's voice was soft. "That's why I hired you." The bus approached, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Before boarding, Tessa looked back at Elliot. "See you tomorrow, boss," he smiled. "See you tomorrow, Tessa." The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Tessa threw herself into learning every aspect of her new position. The supervisors came to respect her work ethic and attention to detail. She implemented small changes, adjusting schedules to give the cleaning staff more consistent hours, ordering better equipment that made jobs easier, creating a system where employees could submit maintenance concerns directly. Elliot watched from a distance, impressed but careful not to interfere. Occasionally he'd stop by her office to check in, or they'd have lunch in the company cafeteria, always professional, always in public. But something was growing between them, unspoken but undeniable. One evening, as Tessa was preparing to leave, Elliot appeared in her doorway. "Working late?" he asked, leaning against the frame. "Just finishing some supply orders." She looked up, noticing the tension in his posture. "Everything okay?" He stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "No, actually, I need to talk to you about something." Tessa's stomach tightened. "Is there a problem with my work?" "God, no." He ran a hand through his hair. "The opposite, you're excelling, everyone can see it." "Then what's wrong?" Elliot sat in the chair across from her desk. "The board is questioning your promotion. Someone leaked that you were originally a custodial applicant, and now there are accusations of favoritism. Oh, Tessa's voice was small. Are they asking you to let me go? No, he said firmly. I wouldn't allow that, but they're suggesting you be formally evaluated. Prove your qualifications. Relief washed over her. That's fine, I welcome it actually. I've been keeping detailed records of all the improvements we've made, cost savings, efficiency increases. I can show them. Tessa, Elliot interrupted gently. You don't understand, this isn't about your performance, it's about me. What do you mean? He leaned forward, his voice low. They think I hired you for personal reasons, that there's something between us. Tessa felt heat rise in her cheeks. That's ridiculous, we've been completely professional. Have we? His eyes held hers. Because I think about you all the time, not as an employee, as the woman who sang while she mopped floors and told me about her grandmother's wisdom. The air seemed to thin in the room. Elliot, we can't. I know. He stood pacing. I know it's complicated. I'm your boss. There's a power dynamic. It's exactly what I've always avoided in business. Then why are you telling me this now? He stopped, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because I've spent my whole life making the practical choice, the business choice, and for once, I want to make the human choice. Tessa stood, putting the desk between them. The human choice could cost me my job. The job that's keeping my brother in school and our lights on, remember? Your job is secure, Elliot said firmly. I'd make sure of that, regardless of anything else between us. And then everyone would be right, she replied, frustration edging into her voice. I'd be the charity case who slept her way to a promotion. Elliot flinched as if she'd struck him. Is that what you think this is? Charity? I don't know what this is, Tessa admitted, her voice softer now. I know that you saw me when no one else did, that you gave me a chance I never expected. And I'm grateful, Elliot. But I can't risk everything I've worked for because of feelings. He nodded slowly, professional mask sliding back into place. You're right. I apologize for putting you in this position. Don't apologize for being honest, Tessa said. Just give me time. Let me prove myself here first before we complicate things. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, you've already proven yourself to me. It's everyone else who needs to catch up. After he left, Tessa sank into her chair, heart pounding. She hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge the growing attraction to Elliot, the way her pulse quickened when he entered a room, how she found herself looking forward to their brief conversations. But she couldn't act on those feelings, not when her job, her reputation, and her ability to provide for Marcus hung in the balance. As she gathered her things to leave, her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emergency at home. Pipe burst in bathroom, water everywhere. Perfect ending to a perfect day, she thought grimly, as she rushed to catch the bus. When she arrived home, the apartment was a disaster. Water soaked the hallway carpet, and Marcus was frantically trying to contain it with towels. I shut off the water under the sink, he said, looking up as she entered, but it was going for a while before I noticed. Tessa dropped her bag and grabbed more towels. Did you call the super? Left 3 messages. You know how he is. After an hour of cleanup, they had contained the worst of it, but the bathroom was unusable and the hallway carpet squished underfoot. We can't stay here tonight, Tessa said, surveying the damage. Let's pack some things and go to a motel. With what money? Marcus asked. You just paid rent and I know you're waiting for your first full paycheck. Tessa bit her lip. He was right. They had less than $100 to last until payday, and cheap motels in safe areas still cost $60 a night. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Tessa, it's Elliot. His voice was concerned. I was calling to make sure you got home okay, and I've been trying for an hour. Sorry, I've been dealing with a situation. She hesitated, then sighed. A pipe burst in our apartment. Everything's soaked. Are you and Marcus okay? We're fine, just wet, and without a functioning bathroom. There was a pause, then. I have a guest house that's sitting empty. 3 bedrooms, fully furnished. You can stay there until your apartment is fixed. Tessa's pride rose up immediately. We'll be fine, I appreciate the offer, but this isn't about us, Elliot interrupted. This is about you and your brother, needing a safe place to stay. As your friend, I'm offering help. That's all. Tessa looked at Marcus, who was wringing out towels in the kitchen sink, his school uniform for tomorrow laid out to dry over a chair. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. I'll send a car. 20 minutes. True to his word, a sleek black car arrived, driven by a middle-aged man who introduced himself as Ray, Elliot's driver. He helped them load their hastily packed bags and drove them through Chicago's northern suburbs to a gated property overlooking the lake. The guest house turned out to be a beautiful two-story home that could have fit Tessa's apartment 4 times over. Ray showed them in, explaining that the refrigerator was stocked and they should make themselves at home. "Mr. Crane said to tell you he'll check in tomorrow," Ray added before leaving. "There's a house phone if you need anything." After he left, Marcus wandered through the house in awe. "Tessa, this place is insane. Is your boss like a secret billionaire or something?" "Not so secret," she replied, still taking in the luxurious surroundings. "Crane Enterprises is one of the biggest companies in the Midwest. And he just let us stay here? For free?" Marcus looked skeptical. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Tessa said, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "He's just being kind." Later, after Marcus had settled into one of the bedrooms, Tessa stood on the back deck overlooking Lake Michigan. The night was clear, stars visible away from the city lights. She pulled out her phone and texted Elliot, "Thank you for this. We're settled in." His reply came quickly, "Glad to help. Sleep well." There's a surprise for Marcus in the garage. Curious, Tessa checked the attached garage and found a basketball hoop set up, with a brand new ball sitting on a bench. A note read simply, "Heard he likes to play." She smiled despite herself, warmth spreading through her chest. No one had ever paid attention to the little details of her life the way Elliot did. No one had ever seen her, really seen her, the way he did. And that was what scared her most of all. Because for the first time since her father walked out promising a better life and never returned, Tessa was beginning to hope for something more than just survival. Hope was dangerous. Hope could break your heart. But as she looked back at the beautiful house where her brother slept safely, with his new basketball waiting for morning, Tessa couldn't help but wonder if sometimes hope was worth the risk. Marcus's excited shout woke Tessa the next morning. "Tess, come see this." She stumbled from the guest bedroom, still groggy, to find her brother in the garage bouncing the basketball with a huge grin on his face. "Your boss left this, can you believe it?" He dribbled between his legs, showing off moves he'd practiced at the community center. "And check out this hoop. It's professional grade." Tessa smiled, leaning against the doorframe. "Pretty nice surprise, huh?" "Nice? It's amazing." Marcus shot the ball, pumping his fist when it swished through the net. "Is he like this with all his employees?" The question gave Tessa pause. Was Elliot like this with everyone? The guest house, the thoughtful gift for Marcus, it felt personal in a way that went beyond professional courtesy. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but we should get ready for school and work. The bus stop is probably a mile from here." "Actually," Marcus said, grabbing the ball, "there's another note. Says Ray will drive us wherever we need to go while we're staying here." Tessa frowned. "That's too much. We can take public transportation like always." "Come on, Tess, just for today," Marcus pleaded. "I've never been in a car that nice before." She sighed, unable to resist his excitement. "Fine, just for today." After a breakfast of groceries far fancier than they usually bought, Ray arrived to drive Marcus to school and Tessa to work. The car drew stares when it pulled up to the high school entrance. "Your friends are going to have questions," Tessa warned as Marcus gathered his backpack. He grinned. "Let 'em ask. See you after practice." At Crane Enterprises, Tessa asked Ray to drop her a block away. "I'd rather not pull up in the CEO's personal car," she explained. He nodded, understanding. "Mr. Crane thought you might say that. He said to tell you he respects your decision either way." The morning passed in a flurry of meetings and emails. Tessa was so busy she almost forgot about her unusual living situation until lunchtime, when Sophie appeared at her office door. "Mr. Crane would like to see you," she said, her expression carefully neutral. Tessa followed her to the executive floor, trying to ignore the curious glances from other employees. In his office, Elliot was on the phone, but he waved her in and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I'll need those figures by the end of day," he said to whoever was on the line. "Thank you, Richard." He hung up and turned his attention to Tessa. "How are you settling in? At the house, I mean." "It's very generous of you," Tessa said formally, aware of the open door and Sophie just outside. "Marcus loves the basketball hoop." Elliot smiled. "I'm glad. I remembered you mentioned he played." He leaned forward slightly. "I wanted to check if you need anything, and to let you know I've called a contractor to look at your apartment today." "You what?" Tessa's professionalism slipped. "Elliot, that's—" "Before you object," he interrupted gently, "I'm doing it as your landlord, not as Elliot Crane." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Crane Properties owns the building you live in. It's one of several residential holdings the company maintains." He slid a folder across the desk. I looked it up this morning when you mentioned your super wasn't responding. Tessa opened the folder to find property records, showing Crane Enterprises as the parent company of the management firm that ran her apartment building. "You're my landlord," she said flatly. "All this time." "Technically, yes, though I don't manage the day-to-day operations of our residential properties. So you're fixing our apartment because it's your building, not because—" She trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Not because I care about you." Elliot's voice was soft. "I do care, Tessa, but in this case I'm also fulfilling my responsibility as your landlord." She closed the folder, emotions warring within her. "Why didn't you tell me you owned the building when I mentioned the leak?" "Because I didn't know until this morning. Crane Properties manages dozens of buildings through subsidiary companies. I don't track each one personally." It made sense, but still felt like another example of the vast difference in their worlds. To him, her home was just one of many assets, a line item in a portfolio he barely thought about. "The contractor will call you directly," Elliot continued, professional again. "They should have everything fixed within a few days. In the meantime, you and Marcus are welcome to stay at the guest house." "Thank you," Tessa said stiffly. "If that's all, I should get back to work." Elliot looked like he wanted to say more, but nodded. Of course. As she walked back to her office, Tessa's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Lane, this is Tom from Apex Plumbing. Mr. Crane asked us to check your apartment today. We found significant damage that will require wall removal and new pipe installation. Estimated repair time is 7 to 10 days. Please call to discuss details." Tessa stopped in the hallway, staring at her phone. 7 to 10 days in Elliot's guest house. 7 to 10 days of his driver taking Marcus to school, of sleeping under a roof he provided, of owing him more than she could ever repay. The rest of the day passed in a blur. By 6, she was desperate to escape the building and clear her head. She texted Marcus that she'd take the bus home and meet him at the guest house later. The evening air was crisp as she walked to the bus stop. Fall was settling over Chicago, leaves beginning to turn on the trees lining Michigan Avenue. Tessa sat on the bench at the stop, watching people hurry past. Businessmen with briefcases, tourists with shopping bags, students with backpacks. Normal people with normal lives who didn't have billionaire bosses buying them basketballs and lending them lake houses. "Penny, for your thoughts." She looked up to find Elliot standing next to the bench, his tie loosened, suit jacket over his arm. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. "Sophie mentioned you left in a hurry. I thought you might want company on the commute." He sat beside her, casual as if he rode public buses every day. "Unless you'd rather be alone." Tessa sighed. "I don't know what I want anymore." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the traffic pass. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," Elliot said finally. "With the apartment repairs, the house, all of it." "You didn't overstep. You were being kind." She turned to look at him. "That's what makes this so hard." "What's hard?" "Keeping things professional when you do things that make me—" She stopped, unwilling to finish the thought. "Make you what?" Elliot pressed gently. The bus appeared at the corner, saving her from answering. They boarded together, finding seats near the back. Elliot looked so out of place in his expensive clothes, yet he seemed perfectly at ease, nodding to the other passengers as if he rode this route daily. "You're staring," he said with a small smile. "I'm trying to figure you out," Tessa replied. "The CEO who pretends to be a janitor, the billionaire who rides city buses. Is it so hard to believe I might enjoy normal things?" "Yes," she said honestly. "Men like you don't do normal things unless there's something in it for them." His expression sobered. "You're thinking about your father." Tessa looked away. "Maybe. I'm not him, Tessa. I know that." She watched the city pass through the window. "But I also know that people with power and money live by different rules. They can walk away whenever they want, start over somewhere else. The rest of us have to stay and deal with the mess." Elliot was quiet for so long that Tessa thought the conversation was over. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the rumble of the bus. "My father worked 18-hour days building his company. He missed every school play, every baseball game. After my mother left, it got worse. The company became his whole life." He stared at his hands. "The night before he died, I asked him to come to my college graduation. He said he'd try, but there was an important merger happening." Tessa turned to look at him. He never made it to the ceremony. Had his heart attack the next morning. Elliot met her eyes. "Do you know what I found in his desk drawer when I cleaned out his office? A list of all the events he'd missed. My 10th birthday, my high school graduation, the day I got accepted to business school. He'd kept track of every moment he wasn't there for." I'm sorry, Tessa said softly. I promised myself I'd never become that man, that I'd remember there are more important things than quarterly reports and stock prices. His eyes held hers. That's why I ride buses sometimes, why I disguise myself as a janitor, to remind myself what's real. The bus stopped near the lakefront, and Elliot stood. This is us. They walked the rest of the way to the guest house in companionable silence. As they approached, Tessa could see lights on inside, and Marcus's silhouette moving past a window. Thank you for the ride, she said, stopping at the front walk, and for sharing about your father. Elliot hesitated, then reached out to touch her cheek lightly. I meant what I said before, Tessa. I'm not him. I don't walk away. Before she could respond, the front door opened, and Marcus bounded out. Tess, you gotta see what Ray brought over. Oh, hey, Mr. Crane. He stopped short, looking between them with sudden understanding. Hello, Marcus, Elliot said, dropping his hand from Tessa's face. Please call me Elliot. Mr. Crane was my father. Okay, Elliot. Marcus grinned. Thanks for the basketball hoop. I've been practicing all afternoon. You're welcome. I hear you're quite the player. He's being modest, Tessa said, grateful for the shift in conversation. He's the best on his school team. Marcus shrugged, but his smile widened. I'm trying out for a travel team next month. Coach thinks I have a shot at a college scholarship if I keep my grades up. That's impressive, Elliot said genuinely. Which schools are you considering? As they walked inside, Marcus launched into his college plans. Engineering programs at Northwestern, University of Illinois, Michigan State. Elliot listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about Marcus's interests and goals. Tessa watched them from the kitchen as she prepared dinner, struck by how easily Elliot engaged with her brother. There was no condescension, no false enthusiasm, just genuine interest in what Marcus had to say. I should get going, Elliot said after they'd talked for nearly an hour. Let you both have your evening. Why don't you stay for dinner? Marcus suggested. Tessa made enough for an army, like always. Tessa shot her brother a look, but he just grinned innocently. I wouldn't want to impose, Elliot said, glancing at Tessa. It's fine, she said, surprising herself. It's the least we can do, considering. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. They ate at the kitchen island, talking about everything from basketball to favorite movies. Elliot told stories about growing up in Chicago that made them laugh, and Marcus shared his ideas for engineering projects that might help communities like theirs. You know, Elliot said as they finished eating, Crane Enterprises has a summer internship program for high school students interested in engineering. You should apply, Marcus. Marcus's eyes widened. For real? That would be amazing. It's competitive, Elliot warned. But based on what you've told me about your projects, I think you'd have a good shot. Would I get to work on actual engineering stuff? Not just getting coffee. Actual engineering, Elliot confirmed. Last summer, our interns helped design solar-powered charging stations for public parks. Tess, can I? Marcus turned to his sister, excitement radiating from him. Of course, she said, smiling at his enthusiasm. If you qualify on your own merits. I'll send you the application information, Elliot promised. But your sister's right, you'd need to earn it yourself. After dinner, Marcus excused himself to finish homework, leaving Tessa and Elliot alone in the kitchen. Thank you for that, she said, loading dishes into the dishwasher. The internship suggestion. It means a lot to him. I meant it, Elliot replied, handing her a plate. He's a bright kid with good ideas. We need more engineers who think about the social impact of their work. Tessa closed the dishwasher and turned to face him. Why are you doing all this? The truth this time. Elliot leaned against the counter, considering his answer. Because when I'm with you and Marcus, I remember why any of it matters. The company, the money, all of it. He met her eyes directly. And because I'm falling in love with you, Tessa Lane. The words hung in the air between them, honest and unretractable. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough, he replied simply. I know you raised your brother alone, working multiple jobs to keep him in school. I know you treat everyone with dignity, whether they're a CEO or a janitor. I know you sing when you think no one's listening, and you clean under chairs because your grandmother taught you that half-done work comes back to haunt you. He stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. What I don't know, he continued softly, is if you could ever feel the same way about me. If the difference in our circumstances is too much to overcome, if you'll ever trust that I'm not just another powerful man who'll walk away when things get hard. Tessa's heart pounded in her chest. Everything he said resonated with her fears, but also with the growing feelings she'd been trying to ignore. I don't know either, she admitted. I've never done this before. Never had time for relationships between work and taking care of Marcus. Then let me suggest something. Elliot's voice was gentle. No pressure, no expectations, just get to know each other. Real dates, not work lunches. See where it leads. And if it doesn't work out, if the board finds out, if people talk, then we deal with those things if they happen, he said simply. Together. The word together lingered between them. A promise, a possibility. Tessa thought about all the times she'd faced challenges alone, shouldering every burden by herself. Okay, she said finally. We can try. Slowly. The smile that spread across Elliot's face was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. I can do slow. He left soon after, respecting the boundaries they'd established. At the door, he simply squeezed her hand and said, "Good night, Tessa," his eyes conveying everything words couldn't. After he left, she found Marcus in his room, textbooks spread across the bed. "So," he said, not looking up from his homework. "You and Elliot, huh?" "It's complicated," Tessa replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Doesn't seem complicated to me." Marcus finally met her eyes. "He looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life." Tessa blinked, surprised by her brother's insight. "When did you get so perceptive?" He shrugged. "I notice things. Like how you smile differently around him. Lighter. Does it bother you, the idea of me dating someone?" Marcus considered this. "Depends. Does he make you happy?" "I think he could," Tessa admitted. "But it's early, and there are complications. He's my boss, he's wealthy, it could affect my job. Life's always complicated, Tess." Marcus closed his textbook. "But you've spent years making sure I was okay. Maybe it's time you did something for yourself too." Tessa hugged her brother, throat tight with emotion. "When did you get so wise?" "Must be all that good raising," he said with a grin. The next week settled into a strange new normal. Tessa and Marcus remained at the guest house, while contractors tore apart their apartment to fix the plumbing. At work, Tessa continued to impress her team and implement changes that improved efficiency across the building. Elliot kept his promise about taking things slowly. They had lunch in the company cafeteria twice, careful to keep their conversations professional when others were around. On Wednesday evening, he took her to a small jazz club where no one recognized him, and they talked for hours about books, music, and dreams for the future. On Saturday, he joined her and Marcus for an impromptu basketball game in the driveway, his expensive watch and designer jeans replaced by a t-shirt and sneakers. Tessa was surprised to discover he was actually a decent player. "Varsity team in high school," he explained when she commented on his jump shot, "before my father decided basketball was a distraction from business classes." As they played, Tessa found herself laughing more than she had in years. There was something freeing about seeing Elliot away from the office, sweat dampening his shirt as he tried to block Marcus's shots. Here he wasn't a CEO or a billionaire, just a man playing basketball on a Saturday afternoon. That evening, after Marcus went inside to shower, they sat on the deck overlooking the lake, sharing a bottle of water. "This is nice," Elliot said, gesturing at the peaceful scene. "Having people here. This house has been empty since my father died." "It was his?" Elliot nodded. "Summer place when I was a kid, before the divorce. Some of my best memories are here. Why don't you live here instead of your downtown penthouse?" He considered the question. Too many ghosts, maybe. Too much space for one person. He looked at her. "Until now." The implication hung in the air, but Tessa wasn't ready to examine it too closely. Instead, she changed the subject. "The contractor called today. They should finish the repairs by Wednesday." "That's good news," Elliot said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We can't impose on you forever," Tessa said gently. "It's not an imposition." He turned to face her fully. "But I understand you need your own space." The moment stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with unspoken feelings. Finally, Elliot stood and offered his hand to help her up. "Come on, I want to show you something." He led her down a path to the water's edge, where a small wooden dock extended into the lake. The setting sun painted the water gold and pink, a perfect Chicago autumn evening. "My mother used to bring me here to watch the sunset," Elliot said as they walked to the end of the dock. "She said it was magic hour, when the light makes everything more beautiful than it really is." Tessa leaned against the railing. She was right. It's gorgeous. "She left when I was 12, Elliot continued, his voice distant. "Couldn't handle my father's obsession with the company. Last I heard, she was living in Europe somewhere." "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "It taught me something important, that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with." Tessa looked at him, really looked at him, seeing beyond the wealthy exterior to the man underneath, a man who'd lost both parents in different ways, who'd shouldered the weight of an empire at 25, who disguised himself as a janitor to remember what was real. "Is that why you're alone?" she asked softly. "Afraid of becoming your father?" "Maybe," he admitted. "Or maybe I just never met anyone who saw me as just Elliot. Not the Crane name or the bank account." "I see you," Tessa said simply. He turned to her, the dying sunlight catching the blue of his eyes. "Yes, you do." Slowly, giving her time to pull away, Elliot leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, questioning, a first step rather than a demand. Tessa found herself responding, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. When they parted, Elliot rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since you mopped under those chairs." Tessa laughed softly. "That's not the most romantic line I've ever heard. But it's the truth," he said, smiling. "That's when I knew you were different." They walked back to the house hand in hand, the simple contact feeling more intimate than the kiss they'd shared. At the door, Elliot said goodnight, respecting the boundaries they'd established. "I'm having dinner with some board members tomorrow night," he said, "but I'd like to take you and Marcus out Monday evening if you're free. There's an engineering exhibit at the Museum of Science and Industry I think he'd enjoy." "That sounds nice," Tessa said, still feeling the warmth of his lips on hers. "Good night, Elliot." Inside, she found Marcus watching a basketball game on the enormous television, his homework spread around him. "Have a good talk?" he asked, eyes knowing. "Yes," she answered simply. He nodded, turning back to the game. "Good." Monday morning brought chaos to Crane Enterprises. When Tessa arrived, the lobby was buzzing with whispers and concerned looks. Her phone had been filling with text messages from her supervisors since dawn, but she'd been busy helping Marcus prepare for a school presentation and hadn't checked them. Sophie intercepted her at the elevator, looking harried. "There you are. Mr. Crane has been trying to reach you." "What's happening?" Tessa asked as Sophie ushered her into the executive elevator. "The board called an emergency meeting last night. Someone leaked photos to the press." Tessa's stomach dropped. "Photos of what?" Sophie hesitated. "Of you and Mr. Crane, at his lake house." The elevator doors opened to reveal the executive floor in turmoil. Assistants hurried between offices. Phones rang constantly, and through the glass walls of the conference room, Tessa could see Elliot in heated discussion with several older men in suits. "Ms. Lane," a stern voice called. Patricia Winters, the HR director who had first interviewed her, approached with a thick folder. "We need to speak immediately." "Patricia, wait!" Elliot's voice cut through the chaos as he exited the conference room. "Tessa, my office. Now." Inside his office, Elliot closed the door and drew the blinds, shutting out the curious eyes of the staff. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "Someone at the board dinner last night mentioned seeing us at the jazz club. Then this morning, these appeared online." He handed her his tablet, open to a gossip website. The headline screamed, "Crane airs secret romance with employee." Below were several photos, them playing basketball with Marcus sitting on the dock at sunset, and the kiss they'd shared. "How did they—" Tessa began, her voice failing. "Long-range lens, probably from a boat on the lake," Elliot said grimly. "I should have been more careful. The house is known to be a Crane property." "What does this mean?" she asked, scrolling through the article with trembling fingers. It described her as an unknown woman who had mysteriously risen from janitor to management in record time. "It means we have a decision to make." Elliot ran a hand through his hair. "The board is demanding an explanation. They're concerned about impropriety, potential lawsuits, damage to the company's reputation. They want to fire me," Tessa said flatly. "No," Elliot said firmly. "I won't let that happen. You're excellent at your job, and everyone in your department knows it. But the appearance of favoritism can be addressed," he interrupted. "There are options." Before he could elaborate, there was a sharp knock at the door. Without waiting for a response, an older man with silver hair entered, followed by Patricia Winters and another board member. "Elliot, this has gone on long enough," the silver-haired man said sharply. "The press is calling, and shareholders are concerned." "Tessa, this is Walter Simmons, chairman of the board," Elliot said, his voice tight. "Walter, this is Tessa Lane, our facilities coordinator." Walter barely glanced at her. "Ms. Lane, would you excuse us? This is a board matter." "Actually, she stays," Elliot said firmly. "This concerns her directly." Walter's jaw tightened. "Very well, Ms. Lane. The board has concerns about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Crane and its impact on your rapid promotion within the company. My promotion was based on my qualifications and performance, Tessa said, finding her voice. A promotion from janitor to management in a single day, Walter scoffed. Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe, especially in light of these photographs. Those photos were taken weeks after I started the position, Tessa replied, anger replacing her initial shock. And I never actually worked as a janitor here. I was an applicant who impressed Mr. Crane with my work ethic and attention to detail. Semantics, Walter dismissed. The fact remains that there appears to be a personal relationship influencing business decisions. That's enough, Walter, Elliot cut in. Tessa's performance has been exemplary. Ask anyone in the facilities department. She's implemented changes that have already improved efficiency and reduced costs. That may be, Patricia Winters interjected, but the company has strict policies about relationships between superiors and subordinates. Such relationships must be disclosed to HR immediately to prevent conflicts of interest. Tessa felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything she'd feared was happening, her professional reputation tarnished, her hard work dismissed as the result of a personal relationship, all because of a kiss at sunset. What exactly are you suggesting? Elliot asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Walter straightened his tie. There are two options as I see it. Either Ms. Lane resigns from her position or she transfers to another department where you have no direct oversight of her work. Or option 3, Elliot countered. The board acknowledges that Tessa was hired based on merit, that our personal relationship developed after her employment began, and that we will formally disclose this relationship to HR as required by policy. The optics are still problematic, Patricia argued. The press is already suggesting favoritism. Then let me make something very clear, Elliot said, standing to his full height. Tessa Lane is one of the most valuable employees this company has hired in years. If the board forces her out, I'll consider it a vote of no confidence in my leadership. The implication hung in the air. Elliot was prepared to fight for her, even if it meant risking his own position. Walter and Patricia exchanged glances. The board will need to discuss this further, Walter said finally. In the meantime, Ms. Lane, you'll be placed on paid administrative leave while we review the situation. That's unacceptable, Elliot began, but Tessa touched his arm. It's fine, she said quietly. I understand the board's concerns. I'll take the leave while you sort this out. Walter nodded stiffly. Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Lane. Patricia will walk you out. After they left, Elliot turned to Tessa, frustration evident in every line of his body. I'm sorry, I should have protected you better. This isn't your fault, she said, though part of her wanted to blame him for his wealth, his position, the complicated world he'd drawn her into. Maybe it's for the best. We rushed into this and now we're both paying the price. Don't say that, Elliot said, reaching for her hand. We'll figure this out, I promise. Patricia appeared at the door. Ms. Lane, we should go. With a last look at Elliot, Tessa followed Patricia to her office, where she was asked to turn in her badge and building access card. The HR director's manner was coldly professional as she explained the terms of the administrative leave. You'll continue to receive your salary during the review period, Patricia said, sliding a document across her desk. We ask that you refrain from contacting other employees or discussing the situation with the press. Tessa signed where indicated, numb with shock and humiliation. How long will the review take? That's up to the board, Patricia replied. Someone will contact you when a decision has been reached. In the lobby, Tessa kept her head high as she walked past curious stares and whispers. Outside, she pulled out her phone to call for a ride, only to find several missed calls from Marcus's school. Her heart sank as she listened to the voicemail from the principal. Ms. Lane, there's been an incident involving Marcus. He was in a fight with another student who made comments about a news article. Please call us back as soon as possible. The world seemed to close in around her. In the span of a single morning, everything she'd worked for was crumbling. Her job, her reputation, and now Marcus was in trouble because of her relationship with Elliot. As she stood on the sidewalk fighting back tears, a familiar black car pulled up. Ray rolled down the window. Ms. Lane, Mr. Crane asked me to take you wherever you need to go. Marcus's school, she said, sliding into the back seat. There's been an incident. At the school, she found Marcus sitting outside the principal's office, ice pack held to his swollen eye, knuckles raw. What happened? She asked, kneeling in front of him. Jason Reynolds happened, Marcus said bitterly. He showed everyone those pictures of you and Elliot on his phone, said you were sleeping your way to the top. Tessa closed her eyes briefly. So you hit him? Not at first. I told him to shut up, that he didn't know what he was talking about. Marcus's good eye blazed with anger. Then he said Dad was right to leave because you were... He stopped, jaw clenching. I'm not repeating it, but yeah, then I hit him. The principal called them in, explaining that both boys would be suspended for 3 days. As they left the school, Marcus was quiet, staring out the car window. I'm sorry, Tessa said finally. This is all my fault. No, it's not, Marcus replied fiercely. It's stupid gossip sites and people who can't mind their own business. You and Elliot didn't do anything wrong. The board disagrees, Tessa said quietly. I've been put on leave while they investigate. Marcus turned to her, disbelief on his face. Are you serious? They're punishing you for dating someone? It's complicated because he's the CEO and I report to him. There are rules about that kind of thing. It's stupid, Marcus muttered. You're the hardest working person I know. They should be thanking you, not suspending you. Back at the guest house, Tessa called the contractor to check on their apartment. The repairs were nearly complete. They could move back home tomorrow. One small mercy in a day full of disasters. Her phone rang several times, Elliot calling, but she let it go to voicemail. She needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. The board's accusations, Marcus's fight, the public exposure of their private moments. It was all too much. Late that evening, as she was helping Marcus pack their belongings, the doorbell rang. Elliot stood on the porch, looking exhausted. Can we talk? He asked simply. Tessa glanced at Marcus, who nodded and disappeared upstairs. I've been trying to call you, Elliot said as she let him in. I know. I needed some time. He noticed the packed bags by the door. You're leaving. The apartment will be ready tomorrow, she said, not meeting his eyes. It's time we got back to our own lives. Tessa, he stepped closer, voice pained. Please don't pull away now. We can fight this together. Fight what, Elliot? The fact that I'll always be seen as the woman who slept with the boss for a promotion, that my brother got suspended defending my reputation, that your board thinks I'm a liability to the company. None of that matters, he insisted. We know the truth. But that's just it, she said, finally looking at him. The truth doesn't matter. Perception does. And the perception is that I'm using you, or you're using me, or we're both breaking rules that exist for a reason. So what are you saying? His voice was barely above a whisper. Tessa took a deep breath. I'm saying we moved too fast. We let feelings cloud our judgment, and now we're both paying the price. Don't do this, Elliot said, reaching for her hand. Don't throw away what we're building because of what other people think. It's not just about what they think, Tessa said, pulling her hand away. It's about Marcus, about my job, about the life I've worked so hard to build. You can withstand a scandal, Elliot. Your name is on the building, but for me this could ruin everything. So that's it? His voice cracked slightly. We just give up? Tessa felt tears threatening but held them back. I need time, space to think clearly without all of this. She gestured around at the luxury home. I need to go back to my real life and figure out who I am without you in it. Elliot stood very still, absorbing her words like physical blows. Finally, he nodded once, a sharp, pained movement. If that's what you need, I'll respect it. He reached into his pocket and placed a key on the coffee table. This is to your apartment. I had the contractor install new fixtures in the bathroom. Better water pressure. The small gesture of care nearly broke her resolve. Thank you. I'll have the board clear your name, he said, voice steadier now. Your job will be waiting, regardless of us. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. His eyes held hers. Because you earned that position, and I won't let anyone say otherwise. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to her one last time. For what it's worth, Tessa, these past weeks have been the most real my life has felt in years. Whatever you decide, I'll never regret that. After he left, Tessa sank onto the couch, the tears she'd been holding back finally spilling over. Marcus came downstairs and silently sat beside her, offering his presence without words. They stayed that way for a long time, brother and sister, facing yet another challenge together. The next morning, Ray drove them back to their apartment in silence. The repairs were complete as promised, with new pipes, fresh paint, and the bathroom fixtures Elliot had mentioned. It was the same small apartment they'd left, but it felt different somehow, like they'd changed too much to fit back into their old lives. It'll feel normal again soon, Tessa assured Marcus as they unpacked. We just need to get back to our routine. But as the days passed, normal remained elusive. Tessa received formal notice from HR that her administrative leave would continue for another week while the board completed their review. Marcus served his suspension, quiet and withdrawn. The gossip articles slowly faded from the news cycle, replaced by fresher scandals, but the damage was done. At night, Tessa would find herself standing at the window, looking out at the city lights, wondering if Elliot was doing the same from his penthouse. She missed him, his quiet confidence, his genuine interest in her life, the way he'd looked at her as if she were the most fascinating person he'd ever met. But missing him didn't change the reality of their situation. They came from different worlds. His life was board meetings and billion-dollar decisions. Hers was budgeting for groceries and making sure Marcus did his homework. The gap seemed unbridgeable. On Friday afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after the scandal broke, Patricia Winters called with the board's decision. "The review is complete," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "You've been cleared of any policy violations. The board has determined that your relationship with Mr. Crane began after your promotion, and your performance reviews support the legitimacy of your position." Relief washed over Tessa. "So I can return to work?" "Yes, but there's a condition," Patricia continued. "To avoid any appearance of impropriety, you'll now report directly to the COO, not to Mr. Crane. Your duties and compensation remain unchanged." It was a reasonable solution, one that would protect both her and Elliot from further scrutiny. "I understand. Thank you. You can return on Monday. Your team will be informed today." After hanging up, Tessa shared the news with Marcus, who was finishing his homework at the kitchen table. "That's great," he said, his first genuine smile in days. "So you get to keep your job, and they admitted they were wrong about you and Elliot." "They didn't exactly admit they were wrong," Tessa clarified. "But yes, I get to keep my job." Marcus studied her face. "But you don't look happy," Tessa sighed. "I am happy about the job, it's just—" "You miss him," Marcus finished for her. She nodded, unable to deny it. "Then why don't you call him? Tell him the good news?" "It's complicated, Marcus. Adults always say that when they're making things harder than they need to be," he replied with teenage wisdom. "If you care about him and he cares about you, the rest is just details." Tessa smiled sadly. "When did you get so smart about relationships?" "I watch a lot of TV," he deadpanned, then grew serious. "But really, Tess, after everything Dad put us through, don't you deserve someone who actually shows up? Who fights for you?" His words echoed in her mind long after he'd gone to bed. Elliot had fought for her, with the board, with the press. He'd respected her boundaries when she asked for space, and before all that, he'd seen her value when she was just a woman mopping floors. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe she was making things more complicated than they needed to be. But before she could decide what to do, her phone chimed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Check your email. Important." In her inbox was a message from Elliot's personal account, containing only a link to a financial news website. The headline made her breath catch. "Crane steps down. CEO shocks business world with surprise announcement." The article detailed how Elliot Crane had unexpectedly resigned as CEO of Crane Enterprises that afternoon, effective immediately. He would remain on the board, but would no longer run daily operations. His statement cited personal reasons and a desire to pursue new opportunities that align with my values. The business world was buzzing with speculation about what had prompted such a sudden move from one of Chicago's most successful young executives. Some sources suggested a power struggle with the board, others hinted at health concerns. Tessa stared at the screen in disbelief. Elliot had walked away from the company his father had built, the legacy he'd dedicated his life to preserving. Why would he do something so drastic? As if in answer to her unspoken question, another text arrived. "The floor you stood on was never just a floor. It was the foundation I needed to see what really matters. When you're ready to talk, I'll be waiting." Tessa read the message over and over, tears blurring her vision. Elliot had given up everything, his position, his power, his father's legacy, to remove the barrier between them, to prove that she mattered more than the company ever could. No one had ever chosen her that way before. No one had ever put her first. Sleep eluded her that night as she wrestled with what to do. By morning, she had made her decision. After making sure Marcus was set for the day, she took the bus downtown, not to Crane Enterprises, but to the small Italian restaurant where she and Elliot had first had dinner. She didn't know if he would be there. It was a Saturday morning, and the restaurant was just opening for lunch. But something told her this place mattered to him, a connection to his father from before the company consumed their relationship. The owner recognized her immediately. "Ah, Miss Tessa. Mr. Crane said you might come today." Her heart skipped. "He's here." The man nodded, gesturing to the back corner table they had shared before. Elliot sat alone, a coffee cup in front of him, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him despite the dark circles under his eyes. When he saw her, he stood, uncertainty and hope warring in his expression. "You left the company," Tessa said as she approached, still trying to process it. "I did," he confirmed simply. "Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do." He gestured for her to sit. "Because I realized I was becoming my father, putting the company above everything else, above what really matters." "And what really matters?" she asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "You," he said without hesitation. "You and the way I feel when I'm with you, real, present, like the man I always wanted to be." Tessa felt tears threatening again. "What will you do now?" A smile touched his lips. "I have some ideas. The company's charitable foundation has always been a passion project. I'd like to expand it, focus on community development, educational opportunities for kids like Marcus." "You'd be good at that," she said softly. "I think so too." He hesitated, then reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. "Tessa, I know I'm asking a lot. Our worlds are different. The gossip won't stop overnight. But I want to try, really try, to build something with you. Something real. I'm scared," she admitted, "of hoping too much, of letting you in only to watch you leave." "I understand why you'd feel that way," he said gently. "Your father taught you that men with big promises don't stay. But I'm asking for the chance to show you something different." His eyes held hers. "Can I just walk beside you? Not fixing everything or sweeping in with solutions, just being there." The words echoed exactly what she needed. Not a savior or a provider, but a partner. Someone who saw her strength and didn't try to replace it, but support it. "I'd like that," she whispered, finally allowing her hand to meet his on the table. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and steady. "I meant what I said before, Tessa. I'm falling in love with you and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in her adult life, Tessa allowed herself to fully embrace hope. Not the cautious, practical kind that got her through difficult days, but the expansive, breathtaking kind that imagined a future better than she dared to dream. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said, the words both terrifying and liberating, "and I want to see where this goes." Elliot's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "Then that's where we'll start, together." Outside the restaurant window, Chicago continued its busy Saturday rhythm, people hurrying to appointments, tourists taking photos, buses rumbling past. But inside, at that small corner table, something profound had shifted. Two people from different worlds had found common ground, not in spite of their differences, but because of what truly mattered beneath them. The floor Tessa had once stood on, cleaning forgotten corners with quiet dignity, had become the foundation for something neither of them had expected to find. A love built on seeing each other clearly, exactly as they were. 3 months later, Tessa stood in the break room of Crane Community Foundation's new office space, watching volunteers arrange tables for the open house. The downtown storefront had been transformed from an empty shell to a vibrant hub of activity in just weeks, with Elliot's vision and her practical management bringing it to life faster than anyone had expected. "Where do you want the refreshments?" Frank, her former custodial supervisor, called out. He'd retired from Crane Enterprises the month before, but had immediately volunteered to help with the foundation. "Along the back wall," Tessa directed. "And make sure the scholarship information packets are front and center on the welcome table." The door chimed as Marcus entered, still in his school uniform, but with a foundation volunteer badge already pinned to his sweater. "Bus ran late. What can I do?" "Help Lisa set up the computer stations," Tessa said, squeezing his shoulder as he passed. "The coding workshop starts right after the ribbon cutting." At 17, Marcus had grown taller over the past months, his confidence blooming as he took on responsibilities at the foundation. The summer engineering internship at Crane Enterprises had turned into a weekend position, helping run technology programs for neighborhood kids. His college applications were nearly complete, with recommendation letters from professors who'd worked with him through the foundation's mentorship program. Tessa checked her watch. 30 minutes until the official opening. Where was Elliot? As if summoned by her thoughts, he appeared at the door, deep in conversation with an older woman Tessa recognized as the principal of a nearby high school. He caught Tessa's eye across the room and smiled, that special smile that still made her heart skip, even after months together. "Ms. Chen is interested in expanding our after-school program to her campus," Elliot explained as they approached. "I told her you're the one to talk to about logistics." "We'd love to work with Weber High," Tessa said, shaking the principal's hand. "Let me show you what we've developed so far." As she led Ms. Chen to the program display, Tessa marveled at how naturally she'd stepped into her role as the Foundation's operations director. When Elliot had first suggested she join him in building the Foundation, she'd hesitated, worried about perceptions, about her lack of experience in non-profit work, about a dozen practical concerns. But he hadn't pushed. True to his word, he'd simply walked beside her, supporting her decision to return to Crane Enterprises while he established the Foundation. He'd respected her need to prove herself on her own merits, even as they cautiously built their personal relationship away from the corporate spotlight. It was Tessa who had finally made the leap, 3 weeks after returning to her position. She'd walked into the COO's office and submitted her resignation, explaining that she'd been offered a role that aligned perfectly with her passion for community support. The transition hadn't been seamless. There were still occasional gossip pieces when they appeared together at functions. Some of Elliot's social circle had been slow to accept her, but none of that seemed to matter anymore, not when they were building something meaningful together. The Foundation focused on practical needs in Chicago's underserved neighborhoods, educational support, job training, community improvement projects. Things Tessa understood from lived experience, paired with Elliot's business acumen and connections. They made a formidable team. 5 minutes to ribbon cutting, Sophie called out. She'd left her executive assistant position to join the Foundation, claiming she preferred jeans to power suits anyway. Tessa did a final sweep of the space. Everything was ready. The walls showcased photos of their first community projects, renovated basketball courts, a new computer lab at the youth center, scholarships awarded to promising students. 6 months of work captured in images of smiling faces and transformed spaces. "Nervous?" Elliot asked, appearing at her side. "A little," she admitted. "This is a big step for the Foundation." He took her hand, thumb brushing over the simple silver ring on her finger, his grandmother's given to Tessa last month on a quiet evening at home. Not an engagement yet, but a promise, a placeholder, until they were both ready for that step. "You've got this," he said with confidence. "Everyone is here because they believe in what we're building." Tessa looked around at the gathering crowd, business leaders mixed with community members, teachers alongside corporate donors, worlds colliding in the best possible way. "Time to open the doors," she said, squeezing his hand before letting go. The ribbon cutting went perfectly. Elliot gave a brief speech about the Foundation's mission, making sure to highlight Tessa's role in bringing the programs to life. She spoke about community partnerships and future plans, her natural eloquence drawing applause from the assembled guests. As people mingled afterward, Tessa found herself in conversation with Walter Simmons, the board chairman who had once suggested she resign from Crane Enterprises. "Impressive operation you've built here," he said, gesturing around the bustling space. Elliot always had good instincts, but this exceeds expectations. "Thank you," Tessa replied evenly. "We have a strong team." Walter studied her for a moment. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Lane. My concerns about your relationship with Elliot were misplaced." The admission surprised her. "I appreciate that, Mr. Simmons. He's different now," the older man continued, watching Elliot chat with a group of students across the room. "More focused, more grounded. The board was initially furious when he stepped down, but the company hasn't suffered. If anything, it's thriving under new leadership, while Elliot does this." He gestured to the Foundation space. "Sometimes people need different challenges to find their purpose," Tessa said diplomatically. Walter nodded. "Indeed. And sometimes they need someone who sees them clearly." He extended his hand. "I look forward to the Crane Foundation's continued success." As he moved away, Tessa felt a sense of closure. The corporate world that had once seemed so foreign, so threatening to everything she'd built, was now just another partner in their work. Not an enemy, not a savior, just people doing their part. The open house continued into the evening, with workshops and presentations showcasing the Foundation's programs. Marcus led a coding demonstration for middle schoolers, his confidence evident as he patiently guided them through basic programming concepts. Tessa watched from the doorway, pride swelling in her chest. Her brother was blossoming into the man she'd always known he could be, his future bright with possibilities she'd once only dreamed of for him. "He's a natural teacher," Elliot said, coming to stand beside her. "Northwestern's engineering department would be lucky to have him. If he gets in," Tessa cautioned, though Marcus's grades and extracurriculars made acceptance likely. "When he gets in," Elliot corrected gently. "And when he does, The foundation's scholarship will cover what financial aid doesn't. Tessa had initially resisted the idea of Marcus receiving foundation support, concerned about favoritism, but Elliot had worked with the board to establish clear criteria for all scholarships, and Marcus had earned his place fair and square. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in him, in us." Elliot's hand found the small of her back, a subtle touch of connection, always. As the event wound down and volunteers began cleaning up, Tessa checked items off her clipboard, ensuring everything was properly documented for their records. Ms. Lane, a young woman, approached, maybe 20 years old, dressed simply but neatly. "I don't know if you remember me. I'm Jasmine. I used to work at the Carson Street Diner." Tessa looked closer, recognition dawning. "Of course. You were just starting when I left. How are you?" "I'm good," Jasmine said with a shy smile. "I saw in the paper that you were running this place now, and I wanted to check it out. I'm taking classes at City College, trying to get my associate's degree." "That's wonderful," Tessa said warmly. "Yeah, but it's tough working full-time and studying." Jasmine glanced around the space. "I was wondering if you had any job openings here. Something with flexible hours, maybe." Tessa thought of herself 3 years earlier, working multiple jobs, struggling to make ends meet, determined to create a better future. "We're actually looking for a part-time administrative assistant, someone organized who can help manage our volunteer program." Hope lit up Jasmine's face. "Really? I've got experience with scheduling from the diner, and I'm good with people. Come by tomorrow," Tessa said, pulling out a business card. "We'll talk about the position properly." After Jasmine left, Elliot appeared with Marcus, both carrying trash bags from the cleanup. "New recruit?" Elliot asked, nodding toward the departing young woman. "Potentially," Tessa replied. "She reminds me of myself a few years ago." Elliot smiled knowingly. "Paying it forward?" "Something like that." Tessa checked her watch. "We should finish up here. Marcus has school tomorrow, and we've got that meeting with the city council first thing." Later that night, after dropping Marcus at their apartment, they'd moved to a larger unit in the same building, one with enough space for Marcus to have a proper desk for studying. Tessa and Elliot walked along the lakefront near his house, now their weekend retreat. The September air carried a hint of autumn, and the city lights reflected on the water like scattered stars. They'd fallen into the habit of these evening walks, a quiet moment to reconnect after busy days. "I'd say today was a success," Elliot said, his arm around her shoulders. "Definitely," Tessa agreed. "The community turnout was even better than we hoped." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of waves against the shore filling the space between them. "I was thinking," Elliot said finally, "about something you said when we first met. About pride and how it's free, even when nothing else is." Tessa smiled at the memory. "My grandma's wisdom, not mine. She was right." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I had all the money in the world, but no real pride in who I was. Not until you saw me, really saw me, and showed me what matters." "You're giving me too much credit," Tessa said, though his words warmed her. "You always had it in you to be more than your father's son." "Maybe," he conceded. "But I needed someone who could see past the name and the money to remind me." He took both her hands in his. "Do you know what Walter Simmons said to me tonight?" "What?" "He said I'm a lucky man, that it took real vision to recognize what I found that day in the break room." Elliot's eyes were serious in the moonlight. "He's right, you know, I am lucky. Not because you cleaned a floor well, but because you showed me what integrity looks like when no one important is watching." Tessa felt tears prick at her eyes. "And here I thought I was the lucky one, getting a job offer instead of a mop bucket." He laughed softly, pulling her closer. "We're both lucky, and I don't want to waste it." "What do you mean?" "I mean this," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. Unlike the simple silver ring she already wore, this one held a diamond that caught the moonlight. "I know we said we'd wait, take our time, but I don't want to wait anymore, Tessa. I want to build our life together, officially." Tessa's breath caught as he opened the box. The ring was beautiful but understated, elegant without being flashy, exactly what she would have chosen herself. "You don't have to answer now," Elliot said quickly. "I know it's a big step and there's Marcus to consider and—" "Yes," Tessa interrupted, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Yes, I'll marry you, Elliot." His face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger beside the silver band. "You're sure? No more concerns about moving too fast?" "Life is short," she said, thinking of her father who had walked away, of Elliot's father who had worked himself into an early grave, of all the moments they might have missed if he hadn't been sitting in that break room the day she mopped the floor. And I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her then, a promise sealed beneath the Chicago sky. When they parted, Tessa rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We should call Marcus," she said after a moment. "Tell him the news." "He already knows," Elliot admitted with a chuckle. "I asked for his blessing last week. He said it was about time, and made me promise we'd wait until after he leaves for college before having any kids." Tessa laughed. "Sounds like Marcus." "He also said something that stuck with me," Elliot continued, more serious now. "He said you've spent your whole life making sure everyone else was okay, and it was time someone put you first for a change." Tears threatened again. "He said that?" "He did, and he's right." Elliot brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You've always been the one holding everything together, Tessa. For Marcus, for your team at work, now for the foundation. You deserve someone who holds things together for you sometimes." "You already do," she said softly. "More than you know." They walked back to the house hand in hand, their steps falling naturally in sync. Inside, Elliot poured them each a glass of champagne he'd apparently been keeping chilled in anticipation. "To us," he said, raising his glass, "and to whatever comes next." "To us," Tessa echoed, clinking her glass against his. As they sat together on the deck overlooking the water, Tessa thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a mop bucket in a break room to an engagement ring on her finger. From a woman struggling to keep the lights on to the director of a foundation changing lives across Chicago. None of it had been easy. There had been obstacles, misunderstandings, moments of doubt. But through it all, one thing had remained constant. They had seen each other clearly from the very beginning. Not the surfaces or the circumstances, but the cause of who they were. "What are you thinking about?" Elliot asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About flaws," she said with a small smile. "And foundations." He nodded, understanding, always attuned to her thoughts. "From cleaning them to building them." Something like that. She leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "You know, when I applied for that janitor position, all I wanted was a steady paycheck. I never imagined that you'd end up engaged to the CEO," he finished with a teasing smile. "That I'd find someone who would see me," she corrected, "really see me, when I thought I was invisible." Elliot's expression grew serious. "You were never invisible, Tessa. Not to anyone who was really looking." She thought about that, about all the years she'd spent keeping her head down, doing what needed to be done, believing that her worth was tied to her struggle. How wrong she'd been. Her worth had always been there in every corner she cleaned, every shift she worked, every sacrifice she made for Marcus. Elliot had simply been the first to recognize it publicly, to name it, to value it as she deserved. "I love you," she said, the words still new enough to feel special each time. "I love you too," he replied, pulling her closer. "More than you'll ever know." 6 months later, on a clear spring morning, Tessa stood in a small room at the back of the lakeside house, watching as Sophie adjusted the simple lace veil in her hair. "There," Sophie said, stepping back to admire her work. "Perfect." The dress Tessa had chosen wasn't extravagant, a sleek modern design in ivory silk that made her feel elegant without overwhelming her. No princess ball gown or 10-foot train, just clean lines and subtle details that suited her perfectly. "Are you nervous?" Sophie asked, arranging the small bouquet of white roses and blue hydrangeas. "Surprisingly, no," Tessa answered truthfully. "It feels right." A knock at the door revealed Marcus in a charcoal suit, looking handsome and grown up. At 18, he stood tall and confident, Northwestern acceptance letter framed in his bedroom back home. "Wow," he said, seeing his sister in her wedding dress for the first time. "You look amazing, Tess." "So do you," she replied, straightening his tie. "Ready to walk me down the aisle?" He offered his arm with mock formality. "It would be my honor." They'd kept the wedding small, just 50 guests gathered on the lawn overlooking the lake. No society photographers, no business associates there for connections, just people who mattered, foundation staff, friends from both their lives, a few board members who had become genuine supporters. Frank, the former custodial supervisor, had brought his whole family. Darlene from the diner sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes already. Jasmine, now thriving as the foundation's volunteer coordinator, managed the guest book. As the music began, not the traditional wedding march but a string quartet playing a melody Elliot had loved as a child, Tessa took a deep breath and stepped out into the sunshine with Marcus at her side. At the end of the aisle, beneath an arch of spring flowers, Elliot waited. Not in a tuxedo, but in a perfectly tailored navy suit that matched the color scheme without being showy. His eyes found hers immediately, lighting up with a joy so pure it made her heart swell. Marcus squeezed her arm gently as they walked. "He's a good man, Tess," he whispered. "Dad would have approved." The unexpected mention of their father brought tears to Tessa's eyes, but she blinked them away. Today wasn't about the past or what might have been. It was about the future they were building together. When they reached the altar, Marcus placed Tessa's hand in Elliot's, a symbolic passing of care, though they all knew Tessa had always stood firmly on her own. "Hi," Elliot whispered, his eyes never leaving hers. "Hi," she whispered back, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment, not with anxiety, but with profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They had written their own vows, simple promises to walk beside each other through whatever life brought their way. When Elliot slipped the wedding band onto her finger to join the engagement ring, his hands were steady and sure. "By the power vested in me," the officiant said finally, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was met with applause and cheers, Marcus's whistle cutting through the celebration. As they turned to face their guests as a married couple, Tessa felt a sense of completion she'd never expected to find. The reception that followed was casual and joyful, tables set up on the lawn, good food, music that had everyone dancing as the sun began to set over the lake. Tessa and Elliot moved among their guests, thanking them for sharing the day, two worlds now completely merged into one community. During a quiet moment, as they stood slightly apart, watching the celebration, Elliot slipped his arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "There's something I've been waiting to tell you," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "The foundation just got approved for that federal grant. We can expand the job training program to 3 more neighborhoods next month." Tessa's face lit up. "That's wonderful news. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to distract from the wedding," he explained, "but I knew you'd want to know." The fact that he'd shared this news with her now on their wedding day, instead of waiting for a more appropriate time, confirmed what she already knew, that he understood her perfectly. Their work at the foundation wasn't separate from their personal life, it was an extension of who they were together. "We should celebrate," she said, squeezing his hand. "We are celebrating," he reminded her with a smile, "but I was thinking, what if we combine our honeymoon with a visit to that community development project in New Orleans, the one you've been researching? We could spend half the time relaxing and half the time gathering ideas for our programs here." Another man might have suggested a purely luxurious getaway, separating work from pleasure. But Elliot knew that for Tessa, purpose and passion were intertwined. It was one of the countless ways he showed he truly saw her. "That sounds perfect," she said, leaning up to kiss him softly. As the evening deepened, Marcus approached with his girlfriend Layla, both heading back to the city for an early basketball practice the next morning. "I'm staying at Kevin's tonight," Marcus told Tessa, hugging her goodbye. "You two enjoy your first night as an old married couple." "Very funny," Tessa replied, straightening his collar one last time, a habit she couldn't seem to break even now that he was practically an adult. "Call me tomorrow before you head to practice." "Will do." He turned to Elliot, extending his hand formally before breaking into a grin and pulling him into a hug instead. "Take care of each other," he said simply. After the last guests had departed, Tessa and Elliot walked down to the dock where they'd shared their first kiss over a year ago. The night was clear, stars reflected in the calm water, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of spring flowers. "I have something for you," Elliot said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small box. "Another ring?" Tessa teased. "I'm running out of fingers." He laughed. "Not a ring." He opened the box to reveal a key on a simple silver chain. "It's to something I bought last week." "Elliot," she said warily. "We agreed no extravagant gifts." "It's not extravagant," he assured her. "It's practical, actually." He took a deep breath. "It's the key to the community center on Willow Street, the one that was closing down because the building owner was selling to developers." Tessa stared at him in disbelief. "You bought the community center? The one where Marcus used to play basketball?" Elliot nodded. "The foundation bought it, technically. It'll be our second location. I thought we could develop those after-school programs you've been designing, maybe add a computer lab like the one at the main office." Tears welled in Tessa's eyes. Of all the wedding gifts he could have given her, this was the one that spoke most deeply to her heart. Not jewelry or luxury, but purpose and impact in the community where she'd grown up. "You remembered," she whispered. "Of course I did." He took her hand, the one now bearing his ring. "You mentioned it once, months ago, how that center was the only safe place for kids in your neighborhood, how it kept Marcus off the streets when you were working late." She had mentioned it in passing during one of their early conversations. The fact that he'd not only remembered but acted on it, understood exactly what it would mean to her, was the purest example of how completely he saw her. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. He slipped the chain over her head, the key resting against her heart. "I thought we could visit after we get back from New Orleans, see what the community needs most." Tessa nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight on the water, two people from different worlds who had found something extraordinary in each other. "Mrs. Crane," Elliot said after a moment, testing the name with a smile. "Mr. Lane Crane," she corrected with a laugh, reminding him of their decision to hyphenate their names, her identity joined with his, but not subsumed by it. "Of course," he agreed, pulling her close. "Always equals." "Always," she echoed, resting her head against his chest. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Tessa thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a woman with a mop to the director of a foundation, from a CEO hidden behind wealth to a man standing firmly in his true purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Elliot asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "About how life can change completely, based on one small moment," she replied. "If you hadn't been in that break room that day—" "I was supposed to be in a board meeting," he admitted. "I skipped it because I was tired of hearing the same voices saying the same things. Best decision I ever made." Tessa smiled, tracing patterns on his chest. "My grandmother used to say that life puts you exactly where you need to be, even when it feels like the wrong place at the wrong time." "Smart woman, your grandma," Elliot murmured, echoing his words from their first meeting. "She would have liked you," Tessa said, realizing it was true. Her practical, no-nonsense grandmother would have approved of this man who valued substance over appearance, who saw worth in places others overlooked. "I wish I could have met her," Elliot said sincerely. "Thanked her for raising the woman who changed my life." Tessa lifted her head to look at him, his face barely visible in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Did I really change your life?" "Completely," he said without hesitation. "You showed me what really matters, what's worth fighting for." His hand found hers in the darkness. "You made me a better man, Tessa Lane Crane." "You were already a good man," she countered. "You just needed someone to remind you." He kissed her softly, a promise renewed. "And I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful it was you." 1 year later, Tessa stood in the doorway of the Willow Street Community Center, watching as Marcus led a group of middle schoolers through a coding exercise. At 19, halfway through his freshman year at Northwestern, he had matured into a confident young man who returned every weekend to teach at the center. "They worship him," Elliot said, coming to stand beside her. "3 of them told me they want to study engineering because of Marcus." Tessa smiled with pride. "He's paying it forward. That's all I ever wanted for him." The community center had thrived in the year since they'd acquired it. What had once been a rundown building with a basketball court was now a vibrant hub offering everything from job training for adults to STEM classes for children. The neighborhood was changing, not through gentrification that pushed people out, but through investment that lifted them up. "The city council approved our proposal," Elliot said, handing her a folder. "We can break ground on the affordable housing project next month." Tessa scanned the documents, satisfaction warming her chest. The foundation had partnered with the city to convert an abandoned factory into mixed-income apartments, with priority given to families from the neighborhood. It was exactly the kind of project they'd envisioned when they'd expanded the foundation's mission. "This calls for a celebration," she said, closing the folder. "Dinner at Marcello's tonight." Elliot's smile turned mysterious. "Actually, I was thinking we could have dinner at home. I have something to show you." "Another surprise?" Tessa raised an eyebrow. "You know how I feel about those." "You'll like this one," he promised. "At least I hope you will." That evening, after finishing up at the center, they drove to the lake house that had become their permanent home 6 months earlier. Marcus had his own apartment near campus now, coming home mainly for Sunday dinners and holidays. As they entered, Tessa noticed the table set beautifully, candles already lit, her favorite meal waiting. "What's the occasion? Can't a man cook dinner for his wife without an ulterior motive?" Elliot asked innocently. "A man, yes. You? Never." She narrowed her eyes playfully. "What are you up to, Elliot Lane Crane?" He laughed, pulling out her chair. "Let's eat first, then we'll talk." Throughout dinner, Elliot seemed both excited and nervous, checking his watch periodically. Finally, as they finished dessert, he reached across the table for her hand. "You know, I've been working on something these past few months. The project I wouldn't tell you about." Tessa nodded. He'd been mysterious about a new initiative, spending long hours in meetings she wasn't part of, unusual for their typically transparent partnership. "It's ready," he said, a boyish excitement in his eyes. "I wanted to be sure before I showed you." He led her to his home office and turned on the computer, pulling up a presentation titled Lane Crane Educational Trust. "What is this?" she asked as he clicked through slides showing scholarship programs, mentorship initiatives, and community college partnerships. "It's a separate entity from the foundation," he explained, "focused specifically on education, full scholarships for kids like Marcus, who have the talent but not the financial resources, funded by a portion of my Crane Enterprises stock that I've placed in an irrevocable trust." Tessa studied the figures on the screen. Enough funding to support hundreds of students each year in perpetuity. "This is incredible, Elliot. But why keep it separate from our other work?" His expression grew serious. "Because I want it to be yours, Tessa. Your vision, your leadership. The foundation will always be our shared project, but this," he gestured to the screen, "this is for you to shape however you see fit." She was stunned. "Why?" "Because education changed your life. Because you fought so hard to keep Marcus in school when it would have been easier to let him drop out and work." He took her hands in his. "And because I see how your eyes light up when one of our scholarship kids succeeds. This is your passion, Tessa. I just wanted to give you the tools to pursue it on a bigger scale." Overwhelmed, Tessa studied the details of the trust. Unlike many educational charities that focused only on top students or specific fields, this one was designed to catch those who might fall through the cracks. Working students, late bloomers, those with family responsibilities like she'd had. "You've thought of everything," she whispered. "Not everything," he said with a smile. "That's where you come in. It's just a framework. You'll make it what it needs to be." Tessa felt tears threatening. After a lifetime of making do with less, of stretching every dollar and opportunity to its limit, she now had the chance to remove those barriers for others, to create the support system she'd never had. "There's one more thing," Elliot said, clicking to the final slide. It showed the Trust's board of directors, a diverse group of educators, community leaders, and business people. At the top of the list was a name that made Tessa's breath catch: Marcus Lane, student representative. "You included Marcus?" Elliot nodded. It seemed right. He understands the need better than most, and he's already showing leadership potential at school. He watched her carefully. "Is that okay?" "It's perfect," she said, finally letting the tears fall. "All of it is perfect." Later that night, as they sat on the deck watching stars appear over the lake, Tessa thought about the unlikely path that had brought her here. From struggling to pay the electric bill to overseeing a multi-million-dollar educational trust, from cleaning floors to changing lives. "Penny for your thoughts," Elliot said, echoing words he'd spoken early in their relationship. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she replied, "and how it all started with a mop and bucket." He took her hand, thumb brushing over her wedding ring. "I think it started long before that, with a little girl who promised herself she'd make a better life for her brother, with a boy who watched his father work himself to death and vowed to find a different way." "Maybe," Tessa agreed, "but we might never have found each other without that interview." "I believe we would have," Elliot said with quiet certainty. "Some people are meant to cross paths, no matter what." Tessa leaned against him, content in a way she'd never imagined possible. "When I was mopping that floor, all I wanted was a steady job. I never dreamed that you'd end up with all this," he asked, gesturing to the beautiful home around them. "No," she said thoughtfully, "that I'd end up with purpose, with partnership, with the chance to do for others what no one did for me." She looked at him, the man who had seen her worth when she thought she was invisible. "The house, the foundation, even the trust, they're wonderful, but they're not what matters most." "What matters most?" he asked, though she suspected he already knew the answer. "Being seen," she said simply, "by you, by the community we serve, having the power to see others in return, to lift them up the way you lifted me." Elliot kissed her gently. "You lifted yourself, Tessa. I just recognized what was already there." As the night deepened around them, Tessa Lane Crane rested in the certainty of a life built on solid foundation, not wealth or status or even charity, but on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the transformative power of being truly seen. The floor she had once stood on, mop in hand, had indeed become the foundation of something neither of them could have imagined that day in the break room, something enduring, something meaningful, something built to last. The end.